Hello, Grill fam. You're watching The Hill with April Ryan, where we bring you the latest in politics every week. Let's begin in historic Annapolis, Maryland, where history was made Wednesday morning. Wes Moore was sworn into office during his inauguration ceremony to become the state's first black governor. I recently sat down with Moore, and we discussed what it was like for him to run against Republican gubernatorial candidate Dan Cox, who was backed by former President Donald John Trump.
You aren't going to lecture me on patriotism.
82nd Airborne.
I said, my definition of patriotism was when I left my family and I deployed to Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne Division and risked my life for this country. And you're not going to lecture me on that. You're not going to lecture me on patriotism when I know I was raised by patriots, because I was raised by teachers. I was raised by ministers. Right? My family is operating engineers. My family are people who built this country with their hands. You're not going to lecture me on patriotism. And I think it becomes incredibly important that we do not allow an individual or a party to bastardize this term. If you talk about people who love this country, how about the people who have sacrificed and bled to make this country better, knowing how much work the country had to do to get better, particularly because some of its most divisive and oppressive impacts were impacting you, right? That's patriotism. Patriotism is not working to destroy democracy. Patriotism is not saying that you love the country, but you hate half of the people in it. So this is something that, we took a very aggressive approach to it on the campaign trail. And I think part of the reason that we ended up having such a resounding victory is if you make the argument, you can win the argument, but you gotta make the argument. And you cannot allow that just to be subsided.
To Washington, D.C., where Congress is out of session this week to honor the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. I recently spoke with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who's also marking the history of Wes Moore as governor of Maryland.
Well, Governor Wes Moore is a phenomenal leader, patriot, and American. And his election is another narrative on our journey toward a more perfect union, which symbolizes the progress that has been made in America. We still have a way to go, but we can be confident that America is on a positive, hopeful trajectory when we see the emergence of leaders like Wes Moore.
Many cities across the nation have seen a spike in crime, including Baltimore City. In a recent interview with theGrio, Baltimore City Mayor Brandon Scott said violence in the city is a public health issue.
Listen, I never make excuses from anyone. There's no excuse to harming someone else or taking someone else's life. But if you live in a city that literally created redlining, it was first passed in this building and took around the country, and that neighborhood that you live in has faced decades of disinvestment where there were no capital improvements. You weren't getting your street fixed. Your school didn't have heat in the winter or air conditioning in the summer, right? The transportation system wasn't built so that your parents could actually get to a job in a quick way, a good paying job in a fast way, and being able to help you. You also had to deal with that outdated public transit system to get to your school, and you were late. When you're talking about all of those factors, the educational factors that we see here, when you're living in houses that folks were allowing you to live with lead paint and lead pipes and the health things that come from that, when you don't have access in your neighborhood to healthy food, but there are 5 liquor stores on one block, it creates an environment that breeds that kind of activity.
And now let's travel to the state of Arkansas, where Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders is already ruffling feathers just days after being sworn into office. Last week, the Republican governor banned both the term Latinx and critical race theory from being taught in classrooms. Chris Jones, Sanders' Democratic challenger, told theGrio that she is pushing right-wing extremism.
She signed a bill, yes, banning Latinx. She also signed a bill banning the use of CRT in the classroom, which doesn't exist here in Arkansas. And she's really promoting the notion of using vouchers, which takes public dollars out of the school system and moves them into private schools and religious schools. And all of this is a part of a long game that she and others like her across the country are engaged in. So you see governors in places like Florida and Alabama who are finding the most extreme ways to divide us and to separate us, the opposite of equality and inclusion, and they're promoting legislation. Unfortunately, here in Arkansas, we have her as governor, and we have a Republican supermajority that is controlled by extremists, and I think you'll see a lot more of that over the next 4 years coming out as they both push their extreme ideas, but also begin to promote new ideas that will work their way up to the Supreme Court and then impact those across the country.
That was a lot. That's it for The Hill with April Ryan. We'll see you next week with the latest news and politics. Peace.